Mr. Ambassador, will you please tell us about your new assignment?
Well, I've recently been appointed as the U.S. Ambassador to Kuwait. This will be my third tour in Kuwait. I've served twice there before, 1991 to 94, after the embassy was reopened after the invasion of Kuwait. I was the political counselor. Then I served there 2004 to 2007. So I have quite a bit of experience in the country. Nonetheless, it was quite an honor to be nominated by the President for the position. I'm looking forward to returning to Kuwait.
That is quite an honor.
How much have you enjoyed the Foreign Service?
I've loved it. I've never had a job that I've felt has disappointed me. They've always been exciting. One of the things about the Foreign Service is you often have the opportunity to be in places where interesting things are happening at interesting times. You may not have much of a role in influencing that, but you do feel like you have a 50-yard line seat on history as it plays out in front of you.
Well, you've been in both dangerous places and fascinating places.
I think that's typical of many Foreign Service careers. You are moving every 2 or 3 years. You're often in, certainly for people who serve in the Middle East region, but colleagues that I have who have served in Asia, in Eastern Europe, in Africa, have also been able to witness really profound events in the countries in which they've been assigned. In my case, most recently in Cairo, of course, I was there during the events of the Arab Spring. I served in Iraq, of course, during the critical period 2007-2008. Saudi Arabia, of course, I was there during the events following 9/11, when the U.S.-Saudi relationship was under a great deal of stress. Subsequently, during that period, my family was evacuated 2 or 3 times from Saudi Arabia because of security concerns. In Kuwait, I served there first right after the liberation, and I arrived in March of 1991. Had the opportunity to help reopen the embassy. And of course the relationships that I established at that point with many Kuwaitis have been deep, friendly, meaningful relationships that I've maintained over the last 20 years.
Can I ask a question about your experience with, did you go to Harvard on Title VI funding by chance, a FLAS fellowship, or?
No.
I'm just curious.
No, and I didn't do language study while I was at Harvard. The program was public policy, international affairs.
But which program was it, and what degree were you doing?
The Master's in Public Policy at the School of Government, and of course that's a heavily quantitative program. It requires quite a bit of advanced skills in operations research, microeconomics and macroeconomics. So I always felt that was very useful to add to the type of skills that I knew that I'd have to draw on in the Foreign Service.
So how important has your Arabic training been to you?
Well, I think everybody in the Foreign Service will tell you that language is just absolutely critical. There's certainly many positions, jobs you can do without the language, but anybody with the language in any position can be more effective overseas. The ability to establish personal relationships, to understand the culture, what's going on about them, and that counts so much for the success of anybody serving abroad in the U.S. Embassy. In my case, Arabic, of course, a difficult language, but also a language where the local dialect can vary quite a bit from country to country. So sometimes I've found challenges in communicating at some levels in countries that I've been in, but having the ability to always be able to use Arabic in contacts with government counterparts, with people from academia, from the media, is very, very useful.
So both the dialects and the modern standard come into play in your work?
Yes, and the dialects that I found to be difficult, I spent a year in Iraq. I found the Iraqi dialect to be very challenging, and often in Iraq during the time I was there, I was dealing with an awful lot of the nascent political party leaders. They came from tribal backgrounds. Often their level of education meant that their language was one that I found difficult to understand. Nevertheless, we could communicate and do all right. But that's just one of the interesting things about Arabic, of course, that other languages don't necessarily face.
I'm very interested to know what your experience has been in terms of using formal registers of Arabic, perhaps not fully so-called modern standard Arabic, but to what degree do you find yourself speaking in that sort of a register where it's quite a...
Pretty much exclusively use, in my line of work, you'd use the modern standard, a fairly high level of Arabic to communicate, and most people will understand that. It's often sometimes when you are having a conversation with somebody whose language they will use modern standard, but very quickly devolved down into a more colloquial dialect.
So
of course, if you're a consular officer, you're often dealing on a day-to-day basis with people whose level of language will vary quite a bit. But you're dealing with a fairly narrow range of topics. So I did my consular service in Amman, Jordan, 1 year as a consular officer. And of course, there you're getting to speak with people about what their jobs are, family relationships, income, family ties, that sort of thing.
So tell us a little bit about your use of Arabic at various posts you've been. So I would assume that this, as you said, consular officer, these are quite different experiences from probably what you've been doing more recently in terms of your use of Arabic. Can you give us a little bit of a feel for the kinds of
Well, the truth
context?
is often, since I've served so often in the Gulf countries, virtually all of the government officials will have been educated abroad and speak English. So what I find very often is a meeting might begin sort of a social chat, warming up using Arabic, but once you turn to business, you'll often turn to English. In Egypt, there were times often we're dealing with officials from ministries outside of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where the officials were not English speakers, and so Arabic was required. I also found I spent 6 months in Yemen, and in Yemen I don't recall ever dealing with anybody who spoke English very well. It was almost all Arabic required.
So
And in Yemen, was this then did you learn Yemeni, or were you speaking mostly more of a standard?
I used standard. They could understand me. I sometimes had to ask them to repeat things or slow down or explain something if I wasn't familiar with a pronunciation or a phrase or a use of Arabic. I was in Aden and dealing mostly with security officials, Ministry of Interior officials, and so the dialect, the language, I remember being quite a challenge.
So, Mr. Master, for kind of to rehash for the other students who are listening to this, how has Arabic helped you progress through your career? You're talking about how important it is in each different post, but some students might want to know, well, did it really matter? Did it really help you move and improve your position and get to where you are?
Well, the Foreign Service looks at a skill set for officers, and beginning at entry level up through the middle ranks and senior ranks, you're always being assessed on the same set of skills: leadership skills, management, interpersonal skills, communication, substantive knowledge. Communication skills includes the ability to communicate effectively orally and in written form, most often in English, but it's always assumed that if you're in a position where the language of the host country is required, that you'll be able to be proficient and demonstrate a proficiency in that. You do have to demonstrate a proficiency in language in order to be promoted up through certain levels. So it's more like punching a ticket. The Arabic, I think, has helped me to enjoy my experiences much more than I would have. But in terms of being a critical skill, I know many colleagues who don't have Arabic or don't use it extensively and still do very, very well in their careers in the region.
But it has definitely helped you.
I would feel my career would be very different if I did not have the background in the language and the background in the culture.
Okay. And you mentioned writing. How much, and we've been talking about speaking in Arabic at your post, how much writing or other types of language usage, like writing and reading specifically?
I do very little reading quite extensively. You know, you want to be able to follow newspapers, magazine articles, things, correspondence that comes in. But you generally have somebody else who will do writing for you.
Okay.
So I have, beyond very quick things that I might have to dash off, I won't need to do much writing in Arabic.
Well, let's talk for a minute about writing in English. How important are good critical writing skills, critical thinking skills?
That's absolutely critical. That's a make or break for Foreign Service officers, and I've seen many who, because they're not able ever to effectively communicate in written or oral form in a manner that the Foreign Service expects, that is something that their career founders on. That's probably maybe in the top 3 of issues that I see that young officers don't have the skills to rise in the Foreign Service. Written communication skills.